The rain had been falling on Brooklyn for 3 days straight when they found Sister Catherine's diary in the basement of Our Lady of Sorrows. It was September 1953, and the ledger was hidden inside a metal lockbox beneath the furnace, wrapped in oilcloth that still smelled of incense and something darker, something like rust. The pages were filled with names, dates, and amounts that didn't match any church records, but it was the final entry that made Detective Frank Russo's hands shake as he read it under the single bulb hanging from the basement ceiling. In careful, precise handwriting, Sister Catherine had written, "I saw them again tonight. 3 angels standing behind Mr. Castellano while he did what needed to be done. Their wings were the color of smoke. They sang while he worked. I think they were singing for me." The entry was dated 2 nights before Sister Catherine walked into the East River with her pockets full of stones. Before we continue the story of Sister Catherine and the angels only she could see, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from, which city, which state. I'm curious to know who's brave enough to follow this story to the end. Brooklyn in 1953 smelled like industry and immigrant dreams turning sour. The neighborhood around Our Lady of Sorrows was a grid of narrow streets where Italian and Irish families lived above butcher shops and bakeries, where men wore their hats low and women crossed themselves when certain cars rolled past. The church sat on the corner of Graham and Ainsley like a stone witness, its spire cutting into the grey sky, its bells marking time for people who needed to believe someone was keeping count of their sins. Sister Catherine Delacroix had come to Our Lady of Sorrows in the spring of 1947, transferred from a convent in New Orleans after what the Mother Superior called a difficult period. She was 28 years old, thin as a rail, with eyes the color of weathered pennies, and a habit of standing perfectly still when she prayed, as if she were listening for something the rest of them couldn't hear. The other sisters found her intensity unsettling. She never smiled during recreation time, never gossiped in the refectory, never complained about the cold or the endless work of running a parish school and feeding the neighborhood poor. What they didn't know was that Sister Catherine had grown up 3 blocks from the church in a tenement building where her father had died of consumption when she was 9, where her mother had taken in sewing and kept a framed picture of the Virgin Mary next to a photograph of her own father, a man who had worked the docks and had connections to people whose names you didn't say out loud. Catherine had entered the convent to escape that world, to scrub the stain of Brooklyn from her soul, to trade the language of favors and silence for the language of prayer. But certain kinds of debt follow you even through cloister walls. It started in October of 1947, 6 months after her arrival, when Vincent Castellano began attending morning mass. He came alone, always sitting in the last pew, always leaving before communion. He was 42 years old, broad-shouldered, with grey threading through his dark hair and hands that looked like they'd built things and broken things in equal measure. Father Dominic, who had been at Our Lady of Sorrows for 20 years, treated Vincent Castellano with the kind of careful respect usually reserved for bishops. The old priest never explained why, but the sisters understood. Vincent Castellano was connected. He had standing. His money, delivered in envelopes, always in cash, kept the parish school open, kept the soup kitchen running, kept the roof repaired, and the heat working through the winter. Sister Catherine recognized Vincent the first time she saw him. Not his face, but the shape of him. The way he carried weight that wasn't visible. She'd grown up around men like him. Men who spoke softly and were obeyed immediately. Men who went to confession and came out looking exactly the same. Her uncle had been one of them before he disappeared in 1938. Just gone one Tuesday afternoon, and nobody asked questions because questions were how you joined people in disappearing. She tried to avoid Vincent Castellano. She kept her eyes down when she passed him in the church. She made sure she was never alone in the rectory when he came to speak with Father Dominic. But Brooklyn was small, and certain connections were inevitable. In December, during the Christmas food drive, Vincent appeared in the parish hall with 3 trucks full of turkeys, canned goods, and toys for the children. The sisters were instructed to help unload and organize everything. Sister Catherine worked in silence, moving boxes, counting cans, trying not to notice Vincent watching her from across the room. When the work was finished, and the other sisters had gone back to the convent, Vincent approached her. He smelled like expensive cigarettes and cold air. "You're Elena Delacroix's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Your mother does alterations for my wife. She talks about you sometimes, says you're very devout." Sister Catherine kept her eyes on the floor. "My mother is a good woman." "She is," Vincent agreed. "I knew your uncle, Tommy Delacroix. Good man. Loyal." It was a shame what happened. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sister Catherine felt her throat tighten. "I wouldn't know about that." "No," Vincent said quietly. "I suppose you wouldn't. You were just a kid." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. "Your mother's building needs work. The landlord's been ignoring it. The stairs are dangerous. I'm going to have someone take care of it. Don't worry about the cost." Sister Catherine finally looked up at him. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes were patient, as if he had all the time in the world to wait for her to understand what was happening. This wasn't kindness. This was how it started. A favor, a gesture, a debt that didn't feel like a debt until it was too late to refuse the next request. "That's not necessary," she said. "It's already arranged," Vincent replied. "Your mother shouldn't have to worry. You shouldn't have to worry." He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "We take care of our own in this neighborhood, sister, even the ones who leave." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing in the empty parish hall. Sister Catherine stood among the boxes of food and toys, feeling something cold settle in her chest. She went back to the convent and prayed for 3 hours, asking God to give her strength, asking for guidance, asking for protection from whatever was coming. But the church was silent, and when she finally opened her eyes, all she saw was the flickering shadow of candlelight on stone. The repairs to her mother's building began the following week. January brought snow and ice, and with it, Father Dominic's declining health. The old priest had been coughing since Thanksgiving, a wet, rattling sound that echoed through the church during Mass. By the middle of the month, he was confined to his bed in the rectory, and the parish duties fell to Father Michael, a young priest fresh from the seminary, who was eager and earnest and utterly unprepared for the weight of a Brooklyn parish with complicated benefactors. Vincent Castellano continued to attend Mass, but now he also began visiting the rectory, ostensibly to check on Father Dominic's health, bringing medicine and offering to pay for a private doctor. Sister Catherine was assigned to manage the rectory household while Father Dominic was ill. This meant she was present during many of Vincent's visits. She served coffee, answered the telephone, organized the priest's correspondence. She tried to remain invisible, but Vincent had a way of drawing her into conversation, asking about her work with the school children, inquiring about the needs of the parish, speaking to her as if she were a trusted advisor rather than a nun bound by obedience and silence. It was during one of these visits on a grey afternoon in late January that Sister Catherine first saw them. Vincent was sitting in Father Dominic's study, reviewing some papers related to a fundraising effort for the school. Sister Catherine was across the room, organizing books that had been left scattered on the shelves. The conversation was routine, mundane even, and then Vincent's tone changed, became harder, more direct. A man had entered through the side door, someone Sister Catherine didn't recognize. He was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and hands that kept moving to his pockets. "Mr. Castellano," the young man said. "We need to talk. It's about Frankie." Vincent didn't look up from his papers. "Not here. It can't wait. He's talking. You understand what I'm saying? I said not here." Vincent's voice was quiet, but it filled the room like a weight dropping. The young man went pale, nodded, and left. The entire exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Sister Catherine had frozen by the bookshelf, her hands gripping a leather-bound missal. She'd heard the fear in the young man's voice. She'd seen the way Vincent's jaw had tightened, and she'd seen something else. For just a moment, standing behind Vincent's chair, she'd seen shapes. 3 of them, tall, indistinct, made of light that didn't quite illuminate anything. They had no faces, but she felt them watching her, felt them waiting. She blinked, and they were gone. Her hands were shaking. She set the missal down carefully and excused herself, walking quickly back to the convent. She told herself it was exhaustion or hunger, or the strain of caring for Father Dominic. She told herself she'd imagined it. But that night, lying in her narrow bed while the other sisters slept, she couldn't stop thinking about those shapes, about the way they'd stood so still behind Vincent. about the way they'd seemed to be watching, witnessing, recording. She dreamed of her Uncle Tommy that night, dreamed of him standing at the end of a long hallway calling her name. But when she tried to walk toward him, the hallway stretched longer and longer until she woke up with her rosary tangled in her hands. I'm making good progress. I need to continue building the tension and showing how Sister Catherine becomes more entangled with Vincent and the crimes, while also developing the angels as psychological manifestations, her mind's way of coping with or justifying what she's witnessing. Let me continue with Chapter 3, showing the escalation and her first direct involvement or knowledge of violence. February came with false promises of spring that lasted only days before winter returned with a vengeance. Father Dominic died on the 8th, quietly in his sleep, with Sister Catherine holding his hand. The funeral was attended by half of Brooklyn, it seemed, old women in black, young families, men in expensive coats who stood in the back and left before the burial. Vincent Castellano sat in the third pew and wept openly, something Sister Catherine hadn't expected. After the service, he approached her in the church vestibule. He was a good man, Vincent said, his eyes red. A real shepherd. This neighborhood needs people like him. Yes, Sister Catherine agreed because there was nothing else to say. Father Michael is young. He'll need guidance. Support. Vincent paused, choosing his words carefully. The parish needs protection, sister. There are people who would take advantage. People who don't understand how things work here. Sister Catherine felt the walls closing in. I'm sure Father Michael will manage. With help, Vincent said. With the right people looking out for him. He handed her an envelope. For the new rectory fund. Father Dominic wanted to renovate before he passed. I'd like to honor that wish. The envelope was thick. Sister Catherine knew without opening it that there was more money inside than the parish would see in collection plates for months. She also knew that accepting it meant accepting everything that came with it. She should have handed it back, should have walked away. But she thought of her mother's building, of the children in the parish school, of the families who depended on the soup kitchen. She thought of all the people who would suffer if the parish couldn't function, if the protection Vincent offered was withdrawn. She took the envelope. Thank you, she said, and felt something inside her crack, like ice. That night she saw them again. She was alone in the church, kneeling in prayer before the tabernacle when the shapes appeared, 3 of them standing near the altar. This time they were clearer, tall figures wrapped in something that looked like light, but moved like fabric. No wings, despite what she would later write. Just presence, just watching. She couldn't see their faces, but she felt their attention like pressure against her skull. Why? She whispered. Why am I seeing you? They didn't answer. They never answered. They just stood there witnessing, and Sister Catherine realized with growing horror that they weren't there to guide her or protect her. They were there to watch, to count, to record. She fled the church and didn't go back alone for 3 days. March brought warmth and something else, a restlessness in the neighborhood, a tension that Sister Catherine could feel but couldn't name. Men gathered on street corners with their hands in their pockets. Cars she didn't recognize appeared and disappeared at odd hours. The sisters were instructed not to leave the convent after dark, a rule that had never existed before. Father Michael seemed increasingly overwhelmed, spending long hours in the rectory, taking phone calls at all hours, his face drawn and pale. Vincent Castellano's visits became more frequent. He brought flowers for the church, donations for the school, groceries for the convent. He was unfailingly polite, always deferential to Father Michael, always respectful to the sisters. But Sister Catherine noticed things. The way certain men appeared whenever Vincent was at the parish, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, the way Father Michael's hands shook after Vincent left. On a Tuesday evening in late March, Sister Catherine was working late in the parish office, organizing records for the school year, when she heard voices from Father Michael's study. The door was slightly ajar. She knew she shouldn't listen, knew it was wrong. But she also knew that ignorance was becoming dangerous, that pretending not to see what was happening around her was its own kind of sin. I can't do this, Father Michael was saying, his voice cracked with strain. What you're asking, it's not right, it's necessary. Vincent's voice was patient, almost kind. The man stole from us. Worse than that, he talked to people he shouldn't have talked to. You understand what happens if we let that go. Everyone thinks they can steal. Everyone thinks they can talk, and then where are we? There has to be another way. Legal? There is no legal, Vincent interrupted. This is how we handle our problems. This is how we've always handled our problems. And you help us. You provide what we need. It's not complicated. You want me to lie, to give you an alibi, to tell the police. I want you to remember who keeps this parish running, who kept Father Dominic comfortable in his last days, who makes sure your congregation has what it needs. A pause. I want you to remember that we're all part of the same community, Father. We take care of each other, and sometimes that means we don't ask too many questions. Silence. Sister Catherine could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She should leave, should go back to the convent, but her feet wouldn't move. There's going to be trouble tomorrow night, Vincent continued. Around midnight, near the docks. You're going to say I was here at the rectory if anyone asks. Playing cards with you and some parishioners. We'll make sure there are witnesses who will back it up. Good men, honest men. I can't. You can. You will. Because if you don't, Father, this parish closes. The school closes. Those kids you teach, they're out on the street. Your soup kitchen, gone. Your mother's retirement home upstate, the one I've been paying for since January, that goes too. Vincent's voice softened. I don't want to do any of that. I like you. I want to help you, but you need to understand how this works. Sister Catherine heard footsteps and scrambled back to the office, sitting down at the desk just as the study door opened. Vincent emerged, saw her and smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and paternal. Still working, sister. You're very dedicated. She nodded, not trusting her voice. That's good. Dedication is important. Loyalty is important. He put on his hat, tipped it to her. Good night, Sister Catherine. God bless. He left. Sister Catherine sat in the dim office, staring at the papers in front of her, the words swimming out of focus. She thought about going to Father Michael, but what would she say? That she'd been eavesdropping? That she knew he was being coerced? What good would it do? They were trapped, all of them, bound by obligations and debts and the simple fact that refusing Vincent Castellano wasn't really an option. That night she prayed until her knees bled through her stockings. She begged God for guidance, for strength, for some sign that she wasn't alone in this darkness. And when she opened her eyes, they were there again. The three figures, standing at the foot of her bed. Clearer now. She could almost see features, faces that were ancient and patient and utterly indifferent to her fear. What do you want? She whispered. Why are you here? One of them moved closer. She felt rather than heard its response, a sensation like words pressed directly into her mind. We are here to witness. We are here to remember. We are here because you called us. I didn't, you did. Every prayer for strength to endure what you know is wrong. Every prayer to understand what you cannot accept. We are the answer. We watch, we wait, we count the cost. Sister Catherine pulled her blanket up to her chin, trembling. Are you angels? The figures didn't respond. They simply stood there, their presence filling the small room, until she finally fell asleep from exhaustion, still kneeling beside her bed. The next morning, a man named Frank Torino was found dead in an alley near the shipping docks. 2 bullets to the back of the head. The police investigation was brief and perfunctory. No witnesses, no leads. Just another casualty of Brooklyn's violent underbelly. Father Michael provided Vincent Castellano with an alibi. Said he'd been at the rectory playing cards until after 1 in the morning. 3 parishioners confirmed the story. Sister Catherine said nothing. April was when Sister Catherine began keeping the diary. She told herself it was for clarity, for understanding, for having some record of what was happening. But really, she was documenting her own descent. Each entry started with a prayer and ended with a list. Names, dates, amounts, the flow of money through the parish, the visits from Vincent and his associates, the favors asked and granted, the small compromises that added up to complicity. And she wrote about the figures, the ones she'd started calling angels, because what else could she call them? They appeared more frequently now. Sometimes in the church during Mass, standing in the shadows near the confessional. Sometimes in the rectory when Vincent was meeting with Father Michael. Sometimes in her room at night, their presence a cold pressure that made it hard to breathe. They never spoke again, but she felt their meaning. They were counting, recording, bearing witness to every choice she made, every silence she kept, Every moment she chose comfort over confrontation. The parish was thriving under Vincent's patronage. The school had new textbooks, the soup kitchen served more families than ever, the church roof was repaired, the pews refinished. Sister Catherine taught her students with dedication, helped distribute food to the neighborhood poor, organized fundraisers and charitable drives. To the outside world, Our Lady of Sorrows was a beacon of hope in a struggling neighborhood. But Sister Catherine knew the cost. She saw it in Father Michael's haunted eyes, felt it in her own prayers, which became increasingly hollow, increasingly desperate. The church had become a front, a place to launder money and reputations, where men like Vincent Castellano could play at righteousness while running an empire built on fear and violence. In late April, a new development. Vincent asked Father Michael, with Sister Catherine present, to hold confession for a man named Carlo Benedetti. Carlo was dying of cancer, had weeks left, and wanted to make his peace with God before the end. The request seemed reasonable, almost touching. But Sister Catherine saw Father Michael's face go grey. After Vincent left, she asked the young priest why he was so upset. Carlo Benedetti, Father Michael said quietly, has killed 17 men. That we know of, probably more. He sat down heavily in his chair. He wants absolution. He wants to confess and be forgiven so he can die in a state of grace. Isn't that the point of confession? Sister Catherine heard herself say. Forgiveness? Forgiveness requires contrition, true sorrow, true intention to sin no more. Father Michael looked at her with exhausted eyes. Carlo Benedetti isn't sorry for what he did. He's sorry he's dying. That's not the same thing. But Father Michael heard Carlo Benedetti's confession anyway, and he granted him absolution, because that's what Vincent wanted, that's what Vincent's continued support required. Sister Catherine was in the church when Carlo arrived for confession. He was skeletal, grey-skinned, moving slowly with a cane. Vincent accompanied him, supporting him gently, speaking to him in Italian, calling him compare, Godfather. The tenderness between them was genuine, Sister Catherine realized. These men loved each other. They would kill for each other, die for each other. And somehow that made everything worse. While Carlo confessed, Sister Catherine knelt in a pew, pretending to pray, and the figures appeared. All three of them, standing behind the confessional, waiting, watching. When Carlo emerged, he was weeping. He crossed himself, kissed his rosary, and Vincent helped him toward the door. As they passed Sister Catherine's pew, Carlo stopped, looked directly at her. "I see them too, sister," he said in accented English. His voice was a papery whisper. "The ones who watch. They've been with me for years. I thought they were demons at first. Then I thought they were angels. Now I think they're neither. They're just keeping count." He smiled, showing grey teeth, and Vincent led him away. Sister Catherine sat frozen in the pew long after they'd gone. The figures remained, standing in their patient vigil, and for the first time she understood what Carlo had meant. They weren't there to judge or save. They were there to remember, to make sure that every sin, every choice, every moment of moral failure was recorded, not for punishment or redemption, but simply for the sake of having a record, of making sure nothing was forgotten. That night she wrote in her diary, "I saw them again during Mr. Benedetti's confession. They stood behind the confessional like witnesses at a trial. I don't think they're angels anymore. I don't know what they are. But I know they're counting something, and I know the number keeps getting higher." May brought death to Brooklyn in waves. Carlo Benedetti passed quietly in his sleep, surrounded by family. His funeral attended by hundreds. Vincent wept at the grave and threw the first handful of dirt onto the casket. It was a beautiful service. Sister Catherine attended and felt sick the entire time, listening to the priest, not Father Michael, but an older man brought in from Manhattan, speak about Carlo's devotion to family, his generosity to the church, his faith in God's mercy. The figures stood at the edge of the cemetery, barely visible in the morning mist, watching, always watching. 2 weeks later, a warehouse fire in Red Hook killed 3 men. The police ruled it arson but made no arrests. Sister Catherine heard through parish gossip that the men had been skimming profits, that the fire was a message. Vincent attended Mass the following Sunday, lighting candles for the deceased, his face solemn and composed. The figures stood behind him during the consecration. Sister Catherine could see them clearly now. tall, androgynous, wrapped in something that wasn't quite light and wasn't quite shadow. Their faces were becoming clearer too. Ancient, impassive, beautiful in a terrible way. She approached Father Michael after Mass, found him in the sacristy removing his vestments. "Father, can I speak with you?" "Of course, sister. I've been seeing things. In the church. Figures. I don't know if they're real or if I'm seeing things." Father Michael's voice was sharp. "Like hallucinations?" "I don't know. Maybe. They appear when Mr. Castellano is here. When things happen, bad things, they just stand and watch." Father Michael set down his chasuble carefully. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. "Sister Catherine, I need you to stop thinking about this. I need you to focus on your duties. Teach your students. Help with the parish work. Don't," he paused, struggling. "Don't look for meaning in things. Don't try to understand what's happening here. It will only hurt you." "Father, that's all I can say." He looked at her, and his eyes were full of a terrible, exhausted compassion. "Please, sister, for your own sake, stop asking questions." But she couldn't stop. The figures appeared more frequently now, sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times a day. They followed Vincent wherever he went in the church. They stood behind men who came to confession with blood under their fingernails. They hovered near the donation box when envelopes of cash appeared. They were present during every conversation about territory and loyalty and what needed to be done. And Sister Catherine found herself talking to them, not out loud, she wasn't completely mad, but in her mind, asking them questions, trying to understand their purpose. They never answered directly, but sometimes she felt impressions, flashes of understanding. They were counting sins, yes, but not for judgment, not for punishment. They were simply creating a record, making sure that every act of violence, every moral compromise, every moment someone chose silence over truth was noted and remembered, not for God, not for heaven or hell, just for the sake of the record itself. One evening in late May, Sister Catherine was working in the rectory when Vincent arrived unexpectedly. Father Michael was out at a hospital visit. They were alone. Vincent seemed agitated, pacing the study, running his hand through his hair. "Sister Catherine," he said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think I'm a bad man?" The question hung in the air. Sister Catherine could feel the figures materializing behind Vincent, their presence heavy and expectant. She chose her words carefully. "I think you love your family. I think you care about this neighborhood. I think you've helped many people. That's not what I asked." She met his eyes, saw the need there, the hunger for absolution from someone who wasn't bound by the seal of confession. "I think you've done bad things for what you believe are good reasons." Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My daughter asked me what I do. She's 14, smart as a whip. She watches me and I can see her trying to figure it out. What her father really does, how we afford the nice house, the private school, the vacations." He sat down heavily. "What do I tell her? The truth? The truth would destroy her. She'd never look at me the same way." "Then maybe that's the price," Sister Catherine heard herself say. The words came from some deep place, some part of her that wasn't completely corrupted yet. Maybe that's what we owe for the choices we make, to have the people we love see us for what we really are. Vincent looked at her for a long moment. "You're tougher than I thought, sister. Harder." He stood up. "That's good. You'll need that. Things are going to get worse before they get better." He left. The figures remained, and Sister Catherine realized she was crying. She couldn't remember when the tears had started. That night she wrote in her diary, "I told Mr. Castellano that we owe the truth to the people we love. But I'm lying to everyone, to the sisters, to my mother, to myself. I keep saying I'm just surviving, just doing what I need to do to protect the parish. But that's a lie too. I'm complicit. I'm part of this. And the angels, the figures, whatever they are, they know it. They're counting my sins too." June arrived with heat that turned Brooklyn into a furnace. The streets smelled like hot garbage and exhaust. Tempers shortened. Violence increased. Sister Catherine taught summer school to neighborhood children, grateful for the distraction, for the innocence of children's questions and games. But even there the shadow reached. Several of her students had fathers who worked for Vincent, who disappeared for days at a time, who came home with bruised knuckles and wouldn't say why. The figures appeared in the classroom now, standing in the back corner, watching her teach. The children couldn't see them. Nobody could except Sister Catherine. She'd become their sole witness, their only acknowledged observer. She wondered sometimes if that was the point, if they were her punishment, her penance, her private hell made visible. In mid-June, a man named Peter Alonso came to the church seeking sanctuary. He was bloody, terrified, claiming that Vincent's men were hunting him, that he'd witnessed something he shouldn't have witnessed, that they were going to kill him. Father Michael called Sister Catherine to help tend to Peter's wounds while he decided what to do. Peter Alonso was young, maybe 30, with a wife and 2 small children. He worked as a driver for one of Vincent's operations. He'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, had seen Vincent and 3 other men execute a rival gang member in a warehouse in Queens. Now he was a liability, a witness who couldn't be trusted to stay silent. "They'll kill me," Peter kept saying while Sister Catherine cleaned the gash on his forehead. "They'll kill my family. I need to run. I need to get out of the city." Father Michael paced the rectory, clearly torn. "I need to think. I need to pray about this." But before he could do either, Vincent arrived. Someone had seen Peter enter the church, had called it in. Vincent walked into the rectory with 2 men Sister Catherine recognized from Sunday Mass. Family men, deacons, ushers. "Father," Vincent said pleasantly, "I heard Peter Alonso was here. We've been worried about him. He had an accident. We want to make sure he's okay." Peter tried to run. Vincent's men grabbed him. There was a brief struggle, quickly ended. Vincent looked at Father Michael, then at Sister Catherine, his expression calm and reasonable. "This is a parish matter," Father Michael said weakly. Sanctuary is for people seeking refuge from unjust persecution," Vincent interrupted. "Peter isn't being persecuted. He's running from responsibility, from his obligations. That's different." He turned to Peter. "You're going to come with us. We're going to talk. Figure this out. Make sure your family is taken care of." "No," Peter sobbed. "Please, no." They dragged him out. Father Michael stood frozen, his face white. Sister Catherine wanted to scream, to fight, to do something, but her body wouldn't move. She just stood there, watching, while the figures materialized around them. Not 3 this time, but dozens, filling the rectory, crowding the hallway. An army of witnesses recording everything, their faces impassive and eternal. Peter Alonso's body was found 3 days later in a dumpster in the Bronx. The police ruled it gang-related and moved on. His wife took the children and disappeared. Back to family in Sicily, the neighborhood gossip said. Vincent attended the funeral, left a generous donation for the widow, told everyone what a tragedy it was, how senseless violence had claimed another good man. Sister Catherine stood at the back of the church during the service, watching Vincent cry real tears, and she finally understood. He wasn't a hypocrite. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing, maintaining order, protecting the neighborhood, making the hard choices that kept everyone safe. In his mind, Peter Alonso had threatened that order, had become a cancer that needed to be cut out. The execution wasn't murder, it was surgery, necessary, justified, and she'd done nothing to stop it, had stood there while they dragged a man to his death. The figures knew it. They'd been there, counting, recording, adding her silence to the ledger of sins that could never be balanced. That night, she wrote in her diary, "I watched them take Peter Alonso, and I did nothing. The angels were there, dozens of them. I think they multiply based on the size of the sin being committed. Or maybe I'm just going mad. Maybe that's the answer, that I've been mad this whole time, and the angels are just my guilt taking form. But if they are, why won't they leave? Why do they keep watching? I'm building well toward the climax. I need to continue escalating the tension and Sister Catherine's psychological breakdown, leading to the final chapters where everything unravels, and she walks into the river. Let me continue with Chapter 7, showing her deeper involvement and perhaps a moment where she actively participates in the cover-up of violence. July brought no relief from the heat or the accumulating weight of sins. Sister Catherine stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. She would lie awake in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the city through the open window, feeling the presence of the figures even when she couldn't see them. They were always close now, always watching. She'd stopped trying to pray them away. Prayer felt like a language she'd forgotten how to speak, The turning point came on a Wednesday evening. Sister Catherine was at the church late, preparing for Thursday morning Mass, when Vincent arrived with a man she didn't recognize. They were supporting a third man between them, someone who was injured, blood soaking through his shirt, his face swollen and barely conscious. "Sister," Vincent said calmly, "we need your help." Every instinct told her to run, to refuse, to get Father Michael. But Father Michael was at a diocese meeting in Manhattan and wouldn't be back until morning. And the injured man was making sounds that would haunt her forever. Wet, gurgling gasps that meant he was drowning in his own blood. "He needs a hospital," she said. "He can't go to a hospital. Gunshot wounds get reported. Police get involved. Questions get asked." Vincent's voice was patient, as if explaining something to a slow student. "You have medical training. The sisters taught you basic nursing. I know this. I asked. I can't." "Sister Catherine." Vincent's tone hardened. "This man is going to die if you don't help him. His name is Marco. He has a wife, 3 children. They go to school here. You teach his youngest daughter, Angela. Remember her? Sweet kid. Loves to draw." The manipulation was obvious, brutal, effective. Sister Catherine looked at the injured man, Marco, and recognized him. He'd helped with the church festival, had fixed the plumbing in the school bathroom, had always been kind, quiet, respectful. What happened to him? "A disagreement. Doesn't matter. What matters is keeping him alive." Vincent met her eyes. "We're family, sister. All of us. This neighborhood takes care of its own." She knew what she was becoming. Knew that this was the moment she could still walk away, could refuse, could maintain some shred of moral distance. But Angela's face floated in her mind. A 7-year-old girl with dark braids who brought Sister Catherine drawings of flowers. If Marco died, that little girl lost her father. If he went to the hospital, he'd be arrested. The family would be destroyed either way, unless she helped. Sister Catherine spent the next 3 hours extracting a bullet from Marco's shoulder, cleaning and stitching the wound with supplies they brought from a veterinary clinic Vincent had access to. She worked by lamplight in the church basement, her hands steady even though her mind was screaming. The figures stood in a circle around them, more than she'd ever seen before, hundreds of them crowding the basement, their presence so thick the air felt solid. Marco survived. Vincent and his men took him away before dawn, and Sister Catherine scrubbed the blood from the floor, burned her blood-soaked habit in the furnace, and knelt before the tabernacle until morning Mass. She didn't pray. She didn't know what to say to God anymore. She just knelt there, feeling the weight of what she'd done settle into her bones. The figures remained after the others left. One of them approached her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from its presence. When it spoke, the words weren't audible. They formed directly in her mind, bypassing sound entirely. "You have chosen. There is no unchosen path now. I saved his life," she whispered. "You saved a killer. You enabled murder. You are part of the machine that crushes and consumes." "I saved Angela's father. Angela's father shoots people for money. The man he wounded was someone else's father, someone else's husband. That family is destroyed. You helped make that permanent. What should I have done? Refused, fled, confessed, died rather than become what you are now. I'm not. You are. Look at your hands, Sister Catherine Delacroix. You are covered in blood you cannot see. We see it. We count it. We remember." Sister Catherine looked at her hands. They were clean, scrubbed. But she felt the blood anyway, sticky and permanent. She understood finally why the figures were there. They were her conscience externalized, her guilt made visible. They were the part of her that still knew right from wrong, the part she'd been trying to silence and compromise and explain away. They would never leave because she couldn't forgive herself, because she didn't deserve forgiveness. She stayed in the church until the other sisters came to prepare for morning Mass. She performed her duties mechanically, setting out the vestments, filling the cruets with wine and water, lighting the candles. During Mass, she saw Marco in the congregation, his arm in a sling, Angela holding his hand. The little girl waved at Sister Catherine, smiling, innocent, unaware that her teacher had just become an accessory to the violence that defined their world. The figures stood behind Marco during communion, counting, always counting. August was when Sister Catherine began to unravel completely. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. lost weight until her habit hung loose on her frame, and the other sisters started asking if she was ill. She told them she was fine, just tired, just stressed from the summer heat and the extra work. They believed her because they wanted to, because questioning her meant questioning the entire structure they all depended on. Father Michael noticed. He pulled her aside after Mass one Sunday, his face full of concern. "Sister Catherine, you need to rest. Take some time. Maybe visit your mother for a few weeks." "I'm fine, Father." "You're not. You look—" He struggled for words. "You look haunted. We're all haunted here," she said. "Every one of us. You know that." He flinched. "What happened in July?" "Marco, I heard about it. Vincent told me. Did he tell you how I spent 3 hours digging a bullet out of a man in our church basement? Did he tell you how I burned my habit because it was soaked with blood? Did he tell you that I've become everything I entered the convent to escape?" Father Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. "You did what you had to do, to save a life. That's not a sin. Then why do I see them everywhere now? The angels, the witnesses. Why are they always watching if what I did was right? Sister, there are hundreds of them now, Father, in the church, in the rectory, in the school, standing behind every man who comes here with blood on his hands, counting, recording, making sure nothing is forgotten. Don't you see them?" Father Michael stepped back, his face pale. "I think you need help, professional help. The diocese has counselors. I don't need a counselor. I need absolution. I need someone to tell me this is all okay, that we're doing the right thing, that keeping this parish running is worth the cost. But you can't tell me that, can you? Because you know it's not true." "Sister Catherine, please. They were there when they killed Peter Alonso. They were there when Marco shot someone. They're here right now, listening to us lie to each other. Tell me you don't feel them. Tell me you don't know what I'm talking about." But she could see in his eyes that he did know, that he felt the weight too, that he saw the corruption and chose every day to ignore it because the alternative was losing everything. The church, the parish, his vocation, his purpose. They were both trapped in the same lie, both complicit in the same machine of violence and silence. "Get some rest," Father Michael said finally. "Please, just rest." But rest meant being alone with the figures. Rest meant lying in bed while hundreds of witnesses crowded her room, their presence suffocating, their silent condemnation crushing her chest until she couldn't breathe. She took to walking the neighborhood at night, wandering empty streets, trying to outpace the shapes that followed her everywhere, trying to find some corner of Brooklyn that wasn't stained with blood and bad choices. On one of these walks, in late August, she found herself at the docks. The East River stretched before her, black and oily under the streetlights, smelling of diesel and rot. She stood at the edge of the pier, looking down at the water, and felt something like peace for the first time in months. The water looked deep, final, clean. The figures appeared beside her. All of them. Hundreds, maybe thousands, filling the dock, standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces finally clear. They were neither angels nor demons. They were simply witnesses, impartial, eternal, recording every moment of human weakness and compromise for some purpose she couldn't comprehend. "What happens if I jump?" she asked them. "We remember. Is that all? You just remember?" That is everything. Nothing is forgotten, nothing is erased, every choice echoes forever. Then what's the point? If we're all just damned by our choices, if there's no forgiveness, no redemption, why not just end it? Because you are still choosing, still deciding what your story means. The end is not written. Sister Catherine laughed, and it came out broken. "My story is written. I know how this ends. I'm going to keep compromising, keep enabling, keep being part of the machine, because I'm too weak to do anything else, too afraid, too tired." The figures said nothing, they just watched, counted, recorded. She didn't jump that night. She walked back to the convent, climbed into bed, and slept for 12 hours straight. When she woke up, she knew what she was going to do. She was going to keep the diary, document everything, create a record that matched the record the figures were keeping. And when it was complete, when every sin and compromise and moment of moral failure was written down, she would make sure someone found it. Someone who would understand. Someone who would make the cost visible. She had 3 weeks left to live. September came with cooling temperatures and a sense of endings. Sister Catherine moved through her days like a ghost, teaching her classes, managing parish duties, documenting everything in her diary. She wrote down names, dates, amounts. She described the violence she'd witnessed, the alibis she'd helped create, the silence she'd maintained. She wrote about Marco and Peter Alonso and Carlo Benedetti. She wrote about Father Michael's coercion and Vincent's gentle manipulation. She wrote about her mother's building and the price of repairs measured in complicity. And she wrote about the figures, the witnesses, the angels who weren't angels. She described their appearance in detail, tried to capture what they were, what they meant, how they felt. She knew anyone reading the diary would think she was mad, and maybe she was. But the record needed to be complete. Everything needed to be documented. Vincent came to the church on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-September. He looked tired, older than his years, his grey hair fully white now. He sat in the last pew like always, but this time he asked Sister Catherine to sit with him. "Something's wrong," he said without preamble. "I can feel it. The neighborhood's changing. My people are getting nervous. There's pressure from the families in Manhattan. They think I'm weak because I've been too generous, too soft." "What does this have to do with me?" Sister Catherine asked. "I need this parish to stay clean, no matter what happens in the coming weeks. I need Father Michael to keep providing support. I need the church to remain loyal. We've been loyal. I know, and I appreciate it. But things might get messy. There might be trouble, police, maybe federal agents. I need to know that you'll all stand firm. Remember what we've built here together. Remember who takes care of this neighborhood." Sister Catherine looked at him, really looked at him, saw the fear beneath the calm exterior, saw a man who'd built an empire on violence and was watching it crack, saw someone who'd convinced himself that brutality was protection, that corruption was community service, that buying the church's silence was holy work. "I'll do what I need to do," she said finally. It wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't the promise he was looking for. The figures were there, crowding the pew, the aisle, the entire church, more than ever before. An audience gathered for some final act. Vincent studied her face. "You look different, sister, harder. I remember when you first came here, you seemed so pure, so certain of things. I was naive. Maybe. Or maybe naive is the same as innocent. And once you lose that," he trailed off. "I've done things I'm not proud of, but I've always told myself it was necessary. That someone had to make the hard choices, that I was protecting people." He laughed bitterly. "My daughter doesn't talk to me anymore. She figured it out. What I am. She looks at me like I'm a monster. Are you?" "I don't know, maybe. Does it matter? The world needs monsters sometimes, to keep worse monsters at bay. That's a justification, not an answer." Vincent smiled sadly. "You've gotten wise, sister. Too wise, maybe. Be careful. Wisdom without hope is dangerous. Makes you do things you shouldn't do." He left. Sister Catherine sat in the empty church, surrounded by witnesses, and felt something settle into place. A decision. A certainty. She was going to end this. Not by exposing Vincent. That would destroy too many innocent people, destroy the parish, destroy families who depended on the church's support. But she could end her own participation, could refuse to continue, could make sure someone found the record she'd kept and understood the cost of what had been built here. That evening she completed the final entry in her diary. She described Vincent's visit, his fear, his justifications. She wrote about the figures one last time, trying to explain what they meant, what they represented. And then she wrote the words that would eventually stop Detective Frank Russo's heart. "I saw them again tonight. 3 angels standing behind Mr. Castellano while he did what needed to be done. Their wings were the color of smoke. They sang while he worked. I think they were singing for me. It was a lie. There had been no angels that night. No singing. Just Vincent asking for continued loyalty." But the truth was too complex for a diary entry. The truth was that Sister Catherine had seen angels, or things that might be angels, for months, had witnessed them counting sins, recording failures, maintaining some cosmic ledger of human weakness. And she'd realized that the only way to balance that ledger, the only way to make her own account right, was to remove herself from it completely. She wrapped the diary in oilcloth, placed it in a metal lockbox and hid it beneath the furnace in the church basement. Someday someone would find it. Someday someone would understand what it cost to keep a parish running when the money came from blood. Then Sister Catherine filled her pockets with stones from the church garden. Heavy ones. Round river stones that had been donated for the landscaping project that never happened. She walked to the East River just after midnight, when Brooklyn was as quiet as it ever got. The figures followed her. All of them. Thousands now. Maybe millions, crowding the docks, lining the shore, standing on the water itself. She stood at the edge and looked at them one final time. "Is this enough?" she asked. "Does this count? Does my death balance the ledger?" The closest figure moved toward her. Its voice was gentle, almost sad. "Nothing balances. Nothing erases. We only record. But you are choosing to stop adding to the account. That is something. Will you remember me? We remember everyone, every choice, every moment, forever." "Then remember this," Sister Catherine said. "I tried. I failed. But I tried." She stepped off the pier into the black water. The stones pulled her down quickly, mercifully. The cold was shocking, then numbing, then nothing. Her last thought was not of God or salvation or angels. It was of Angela, the little girl with the drawings of flowers, and the hope that someone someday would make sure Angela grew up in a world where churches didn't have to trade morality for survival. The figures stood vigil on the water's surface until dawn. Then they faded back into whatever place they came from, carrying with them the record of Sister Catherine Delacroix, a woman who chose to become complicit, documented her own corruption, and paid the only price she thought would matter. The next morning, a dock worker found her body caught against a piling. The police pulled her from the river, found the stones in her pockets, and ruled it suicide. Her mother identified the body and wept for days. The sisters at Our Lady of Sorrows held a funeral mass. Vincent Castellano attended, cried genuine tears, and left a generous donation for a memorial in Sister Catherine's name. Father Michael delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he spoke of Sister Catherine's dedication, her service, her devotion to the parish and its people. He said she'd died of exhaustion and overwork, that she'd sacrificed herself for others, that she was surely in heaven with the angels she'd loved so much. He didn't mention the diary, didn't mention the compromises or the complicity or the weight that had crushed her, didn't mention that she'd been carrying the sins of an entire community on shoulders too fragile to bear them. The parish continued. The school remained open. The soup kitchen kept serving the poor. Vincent Castellano continued attending Mass every Sunday, sitting in the last pew, lighting candles, making donations, maintaining the illusion of righteousness. And 3 months later, Detective Frank Russo was assigned to investigate a series of suspicious transactions linked to Our Lady of Sorrows. He was thorough, methodical, the kind of cop who didn't give up easily. He searched the church from top to bottom, looking for evidence of money laundering, of organized crime connections, of the network everyone knew existed, but nobody could prove. He found the diary in the church basement, wrapped in oilcloth, hidden beneath the furnace. And when he read Sister Catherine's final entry, about angels with smoke-colored wings singing during Mr. Castellano's work, he understood that he was holding a confession that would bring down an empire. But he also understood the cost. Understood that exposing Vincent meant exposing the parish's corruption, destroying a community anchor, revealing how complicit everyone had been. The children would lose their school. The families would lose their support system. The neighborhood would descend into chaos. Detective Russo made his decision. He kept the diary, used it to pressure Vincent quietly, forcing him to retire, to move his operations elsewhere, to leave Brooklyn behind. The parish was allowed to quietly reorganize, to find new sources of funding, to slowly wash the blood from its foundations. The diary itself was locked in evidence storage, classified as part of an ongoing investigation that would never actually close. Nobody read it except Russo. Nobody knew what Sister Catherine had documented except the one man who understood that sometimes justice meant silence, that sometimes the right thing was protecting people from knowing how rotten the system that sustained them really was. And sometimes late at night when Russo couldn't sleep, he would sit in his office and read Sister Catherine's entries, would try to understand what she meant about the angels, about the witnesses, about the figures who counted sins and kept records. He never saw them himself, never felt their presence, but he believed her. believed that someone, something, was keeping track, making sure nothing was forgotten, that somewhere, in some vast cosmic ledger, Sister Catherine Delacroix's story was recorded in full. The good and the bad, the innocence and the corruption, the moment she chose to save Marco's life, and the moment she chose to fill her pockets with stones. All of it remembered, all of it counted, and maybe that was enough. Maybe being remembered was its own form of judgment and redemption. Maybe the only true witness we need is the one who sees everything and never looks away. Detective Rousseau closed the diary, locked it back in evidence storage, and went home to his wife and children. He went to Mass that Sunday at a different church, in a different borough, where the priest didn't have shadows behind his eyes and the donations didn't smell like blood. But he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere someone was watching, counting, recording, making sure that every choice, every compromise, every moment of human weakness was documented in some permanent record. And he wondered, just once, if Sister Catherine had been right, if the angels she saw were real in the only way that mattered, as witnesses to the truth we try so hard to hide, as the part of ourselves that never stops counting the cost, as the voice that whispers in the dark. We remember, we are watching, we are keeping count. The story of Sister Catherine Delacroix ended in the East River in September 1953, but the record of her life continued, preserved in a diary hidden in evidence storage, in the memories of the people she taught and served, in the small acts of kindness she performed even while drowning in complicity. She had tried to balance an impossible ledger, had tried to serve God while serving the men who profited from violence, had tried to save innocent children while enabling their father's crimes, had tried to maintain her soul while surrendering it piece by piece to the machine that fed on silence and fear. In the end, she'd failed, but she'd also succeeded in the only way that mattered, by refusing to continue, by stopping, by saying that even if she couldn't undo what she'd done, she could at least stop doing it. And sometimes, in a world built on compromise and corruption, the most radical act of all is simply to stop participating. The angels Sister Catherine saw, whether they were hallucinations or manifestations of guilt or something beyond human understanding, served a purpose. They bore witness, they counted, they remembered, and in a world where most people's sins are forgotten, where most compromises fade into history, where most moral failures are buried and erased, maybe that's what we need most. Someone who remembers, someone who counts, someone who never stops watching. Sister Catherine walked into the river believing she was ending her story. But stories don't end. They echo, they resonate, they change shape and meaning with each person who hears them. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood that has long since gentrified and changed, the Church of Our Lady of Sorrows still stands, the school still operates, the soup kitchen still serves the poor, the blood has been washed away, the compromises have been forgotten. The names in Sister Catherine's diary are mostly dead now, their sins buried with them. But the record remains, in a locked evidence box, in the memories of those who knew, in the shape of the questions we ask about the cost of doing good in a compromised world, and maybe, just maybe, in the presence of witnesses we cannot see but can sometimes feel. Standing at the edges of our awareness, counting the choices we make, recording the prices we pay, maintaining the ledger that never truly balances, but at least never forgets. Sister Catherine Delacroix died believing she was damned, but she left behind evidence of her struggle, proof that she knew what she'd become and chose to stop. Documentation of the terrible weight of being caught between faith and reality, between serving God and serving the people who claim to protect God's flock while staining it with blood. That documentation was her final act of defiance, her last confession, her attempt to make sure that someone somewhere would understand the cost. And now you understand it too. Now you've heard her story. Now you carry a piece of her record forward, keeping it alive, keeping her remembered, making sure that the choices she made and the price she paid are not forgotten. Because in the end, that's all we can do. Remember, bear witness, count the cost, and hope that when it's our turn to face the ledger, someone will remember us with the same complicated compassion that we remember Sister Catherine, a woman who failed and tried and failed again, who compromised and resisted and finally chose the only escape she could see, who believed in angels even as she drowned in sins she couldn't wash away. Her wings were the color of smoke. They sang while she sank. And somewhere in the place where all witnesses gather, her story is recorded in full, not as a warning or a lesson, but simply as truth. The permanent, unchangeable, witnessed truth of one woman's struggle to maintain her soul, while the world demanded she surrender it in pieces. May she rest in whatever peace the witnessed can find. May her memory be eternal. May her angels, real or imagined, continue their counting, their recording, their patient witnessing of every human soul struggling to choose between survival and righteousness in a world that makes both nearly impossible. The story ends here, but the echo continues, always counting, always remembering, always watching from the edges where smoke and light become indistinguishable, where judgment and compassion blur into simple, eternal witness. Sister Catherine saw the angels. The angels saw Sister Catherine, and now we see them both, preserved in ink and testimony, in the record that never fades, in the memory that never dies. We are watching, we are counting, we remember.